This is our next tutorial using Animate. We are going to be animating a small ball and reviewing some of the skills that we've already learned. Open up a new file. From here, let's just review some of the things we know. So this is the stage. Animate uses a stage metaphor, so we have on and off stage. If I zoom out, the stage is, this will show up in your animation, and anything off stage over here will be on in your file, but not on your animation, your final input. Zooming in and out, Command minus to zoom out, Command plus to zoom in, Command 1 to go 100%. There's also a selection here where you can decide on the physical size. I want to reset my workspace. We always do this at the beginning of a lesson so that your workspace matches mine. So I'm going to go to Essentials, and I'm going to reset it to Essentials, hit yes, and that puts everything back where it belongs. And the fourth kind of areas that I care about right now, our toolbar is over here, our stage is over here, our timeline is this guy down here, and over here we have a properties palette. Today we'll also be looking at the library, which is over here. We'll come back to that in a moment. As a reminder, the timeline that we have here is basically pages of a flipbook. So if we had an animated flipbook, we would be indicating how many pages are in our book right now. By default, there's only one page right here. We're on frame 1, and we don't have any additional yet. We'll be adding some soon. Also note that here, where we have this little circle, that tells us something about what's on that frame. Right now, we don't have anything on the frame, so it's blank. As soon as I draw something on the frame, this turns to black, indicating that there is something on that frame. Something to keep in mind is that only one item can be animated per layer in Animate. We need to keep aware of that. It's a very easy mistake to make, so be aware of that while we're working. Some other things I just going to very quickly review is that for now, while we're using the oval tool, we want to make sure a couple of things. One, we're not using the primitive tool. That's not something we want to use for now. We want to use the oval tool, and the same will happen with the rectangle tool. We don't want to use the primitive tools for now. We're just using the simple tools here. Oval tool. Once that is selected, keep in mind that this will snap on drawing objects, which we do not want for now. We'll learn that later, but for now we want to leave this off, okay? And so always do check that this has been reset to be off. I'm going to make a shape here. Notice that it's not snapping to a circle. If I hold shift, it'll snap to a circle, but there's also a way to make that happen automatically. If you go to view and then go to snapping and turn on snap to objects, now when I drag it, when it gets close to a circle, it snaps to that position. Okay, same thing will happen with a rectangle. Just as a reminder, the way that Animate works is we have a fill and we have a stroke. These are treated as two separate objects. So if I click away and I click on this red fill and drag it, notice that I've missed only this section. Here, if I click on, I'm going to get rid of these guys. If I click only on the stroke, I've only selected that one portion, not including the fill. If I want to select two things, I need to double click on the fill and it will select both things, and now I've gotten both. But just be aware when I select away and then reselect, this is now again only the fill. This is a very common mistake and easy to make mistakes with. Very often I'll see students who want to take something and turn it into a graphic or a movie clip, and they'll only select this, which means they will animate this piece, but having left this behind, this will not be part of the animation, and it makes a big mistake, okay? A couple other things. We have looked previously at the bucket tool. Paint bucket tool will fill in a fill. So if I click here, it'll fill this with my current color, which is red. And if I want to fill a stroke, the tool just below it, the ink bottle tool, will fill in a stroke around whatever fill exists. Okay, I can also make changes and choose a different color, and that will then update this with my new selected color. Great. Selection tool will be on my keyboard to click, double click, and delete to get rid of things. I want to take this and we're going to start working on our animation with this. So first of all, what I want to do is I want to position this centered in my screen. So I'm going to go Window. I'm going to go to Align. I'm going to drag this over here so you can see it. I'm going to make sure that Align to Stage is selected because I want to align this horizontally to the center of the stage, and that's now centered. And I'll turn this off for now. I'm going to go back to our properties palette and notice here that we have X and Y coordinates. Okay, X moves our horizontal, which I'm going to undo so that it's still centered, and Y moves our vertical up and down. Okay, I'm going to put this around here. Zoom out a little bit. All right, now what I want to do is I need to turn this into something called a symbol. So I'm going to open up my library palette here and bring it over so we can view it. The library palette is important as we get into animation, and the way that we're going to be animating is going to be using classic tweens. We'll learn what those are in a minute, but to make that happen, we need to make sure that we have turned our objects into something called a symbol. What you'll notice here at the bottom of the library palette, we have this little plus. And if I click on it, it's going to say new symbol. There are two ways to create a symbol. I can create a new symbol by clicking this and then defining it, or I can have an object that I've drawn and select it and turn it into a symbol, which is convert to symbol. That's what we're going to do right now. So make sure, again, that you have double-clicked. Make sure that you've got the fill and the stroke, then right-click and say convert to symbol. That symbol will ask you, or that dialog box will ask you what you want to name it. So we're going to call this ball, and I'm going to change this type to a graphic. There are three kinds: movie clip, button, and graphic. For now, we only care about graphics, so we'll click this. Yours may not have the advanced. We don't need the advanced right now, so we can leave that closed. And then the other thing I want to note is that here, this registration point means that the ball has a rectangle or a square around it, and the registration point, which is the 0, 0 for this thing, is going to be up in that top left corner, not the center. So if I hit OK, and I set this property to 0 and 0, notice that that registration point is here. Okay, if I had made the registration point in the middle, then this point would have snapped to the middle of this. Okay, but that's not what I did. I'm going to put this back where it was. Okay, the next thing I want to do is pay attention to what we can do with an object that is in my library. So notice that I have this here and it appears here. This is the ball symbol that we're looking at. I'm going to drag a couple duplicate layers or duplicate instances out onto this page here. And so now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these. These are all my duplicates. These are called instances because they are exact instances of this. So I'm going to double click this and I want you to pay attention to two things. Pay attention to up here where it says scene 1 and pay attention to what happens to the other 4 balls when I double click this. Double clicking makes this selected. It changed this from scene 1 to scene 1 ball, and it turned all of the other options, other objects kind of grayed out, okay? If I double click the white area, it's going to take me back out to the main timeline and back out to scene 1. So I double click, there, I'm now back on scene 1, okay? So double click, I enter edit mode for this thing. These are all grayed out, and it shows me that I'm editing ball, which is this object right here. Double click the white area, it takes me back out to the main timeline. Now these timelines, this timeline that you see here, this is the timeline for my movie. When I double click this, I'm now on a separate timeline, a different timeline, and that is specific to this object. So I'm going to just show you by going here. I'm going to insert a frame here. So notice that there are 15 frames here on this timeline. If I double click the white area, notice that these are going to go away because this timeline is separate from the main timeline, which now only has 1 frame. This is kind of like a sub movie clip or a sub kind of animation only for this, okay? Because this is a separate timeline. I'm gonna get rid of these for now. We don't need them. I just wanted to show you that, but I'm gonna remove these frames. Okay, so we're back down to having 1 frame, which is this, just this guy. And the only thing that's on this frame is this here. Notice that this is a duplicate of this. So if I change this color to any other color, notice it updates all these because, as I said, this is an instant. Same thing with this. If I click here and I make my stroke size thicker, okay, it's going to thicken up my stroke on all instances that are shared, okay, which are these, okay? To get back out, I can either double click on the white area or I can actually click scene 1 here or this arrow to go back up a level, and now I'm on my main scene. To help make this really clear, I'm going to just make this, make some new layers here. Okay, right now, this has all 5 of my circles or my balls on it, okay? We're gonna call this ball, or we'll call this original ball, okay? And then we're gonna drag these to some different layers. I'm gonna Command X or edit cut, and then I'm gonna put this here on this layer, edit, paste, and center. That's gonna go here. I do the same thing here. I'm gonna select it, notice it tells me what layer it's on. Command X, which is edit, cut. And I'm going to go to this layer and I'm going to paste that here, edit, paste, which is Command V. Paste it and center. It's right on top of the other one. So I'm going to move that out of the way. I'm going to now go Command X, which is cut. I'm going to put it here, Command Shift V will paste it in place. Instead of setting it on this in the center here, if I say edit, paste in place, we'll put it back right where it was. Okay, puts it back in that position. Again, Command X, go to this layer, Command Shift V will paste it in place. All right, so let's move these. Notice that these 5 guys are now all on their own layers. Okay, original ball, and then 2, 3, 4, 5. If I double click any of these, notice that those are gone because this is the timeline for this specific ball. Okay, it's separate from the timeline that we see here. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to double click back into this timeline. I'm going to rename this purple. I'm going to go back out to my main timeline here. Notice that nothing changed here because we edited this one. But when I go back out to my scene 1, if I double click this guy here, notice that this has already changed to purple because this is an instance of this. And you'll notice that all of these are now called purple because I'm just looking at the same thing in 5 different places. This is the same object. If I make change to this and change this to be orange and update this to be called orange, you'll see the same thing in each of these elements. These are the same guy. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to delete these guys off my main timeline by just deleting the layers because I only need the original. Let's align that back to our center. Window, align to stage, center, and I'm actually going to bring this straight up. I can hold Shift, and this will lock it to the same horizontal position so it doesn't move off. If I hold Shift, it'll lock it in either up or down, horizontal or diagonal. Okay, so I'm going to go straight up to here. We're going to place that there. I'm going to put my workspace back to Essentials and continue. What I want to do here is I want to have this ball start here, and over 15 frames, I want it to move to the bottom of this stage. And then the next 15 frames, I'm going to have it move back up to the top. So I want this to be what's called a keyframe. The difference between a frame and a keyframe is where something important happens or some position matters. Because I want my ball to start here, this is a keyframe. Because I want it to finish down here, I want a keyframe to exist here. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to insert keyframe. Now notice before I do that, there are 2 items here. There's a blank keyframe and a keyframe. If I insert a blank keyframe, it will add a keyframe after this, and there will be a small empty circle, meaning that there is nothing. Oops. What happened there was I had this selected. I'm going to just do it here to show you. I'm going to insert a blank keyframe right there, and notice there's nothing in that circle. It's empty because there's nothing on this layer. But here on this page or on this frame, there is. I'm going to undo that. This time I'm going to add a keyframe. And when I insert a keyframe, it's going to bring whatever was on this layer here at this point on this frame into the second frame. Insert keyframe. And now notice that it is black. And there is something on this layer, which is the same thing that was on the second layer. Okay. And so that basically is moving, showing us a 2-page animation with a ball in the exact same position on both. If I take this one and just move it down a little bit, I'm going to hold Shift and move it just to here. And then if I test my movie, Control, Test, what we're going to see is a 2-frame animation of this thing moving back and forth 30 times a second, which is very fast. That's a 30 frame per second animation. I'm going to close that and go back. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to undo all of this. Back to this point. What I want to happen is I want this ball to go over 15 frames, not 2. So I'm going to click on 15. I'm going to right click and say insert keyframe, not blank keyframe, keyframe. And that's going to carry over what was here to the new keyframe. And you'll see that this exists now for 15 frames from here to here. This doesn't change. This starts here and it doesn't move. So if I now test my movie, Control, Test, we're going to watch a 15-frame animation where the ball doesn't move. And as much as it looks like nothing is happening, what's actually happening is this frame is flipping through like a 15-page flip book with the ball in exactly the same place. Okay. If I took this and moved it physically down by a little bit, for 14 frames, it's going to be in the exact same position. And then on the last frame, it's going to snap over to here. So if I now go Control and I say Test, For 15 frames, it stays still, and then for 1 frame, it snaps out of position and moves back, and it just keeps continuing. Okay, I'm going to put this back where it was, so I'm going to hit undo. Too far. Command Y is redo. No, it's not. Edit. Redo. Yeah, Command Y. That's not working for some reason. Anyway, I'm just going to redo it then. So I'm going to go to 15. I'm going to insert a keyframe. Okay, and there's my 15-frame animation again. Okay, I can hit Command Return or Control Test to test my movie, and there's my 15-frame animation again with the ball in the exact same position. What do I want to do? Well, what I want to happen is I want the ball to start here, and by the end of the animation, I want it to be down at the very bottom here. So on frame 15, being careful to put your playhead at the right position, I'm going to drag this straight down, holding Shift, and bring it to my resting point at the bottom here. Now, as you probably noticed, this only moved on this frame. So this goes back here for 15 frames and nothing happens for 15 frames. And then it jumps down here and then it loops. So again, Command Return. It does exactly the same thing, except instead of going from 14 frames here and one just a little below, it snaps down here every 15th frame. What I want to do is I want to have the computer interpolate the difference. Over 15 frames, I want it to smoothly create the animation between. So I'm going to right click here. Anywhere, you can click anywhere between these two. Right click here and say create classic tween. Now there's two here. Notice there's motion tween and classic tween. We'll learn this one after. For now, we're starting with this classic tween. This purple color here indicates that we have an animation happening. And what you'll notice now is the computer has measured the distance between this place and this place and has measured and adapted the animation so that it starts here and ends here evenly. If, for example, I took this and moved it over here, notice that the computer will update that. Okay, it'll change that depending on what I want. Let's put it back where it was. There's our animation. Now what I want to do is I want to have this return for the next 15 frames back up to the top position. There's a couple ways I can do this. I can click here and I can insert my keyframe. And what that's going to do is it's going to put this ball, which is in this position right here, which is at the X 894 and 848 X and Y position. Okay, if I put this here and I insert a keyframe, it's going to put that ball at the same physical position. But that's not where I want it. Where I actually want it is I want it in this physical position, which is 894.25, 91.95. So the way to do that is I'm actually going to undo these steps until I don't have a keyframe here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a blank keyframe. Insert blank keyframe. Now notice that there's nothing here. What I'm going to do is go back over here. I'm going to copy, right click, copy, and then come back over here. And if I want it to be back where it was, I can again edit, paste in place. And it's going to drop that now at the same position. Right? There's that same position, XY position that we had at the beginning. What that does now is when it gets to the end, it's in the same spot so that it'll loop evenly when it gets back here. I need to add my animation by right clicking and saying create classic tween. And now when I test my movie, control, test, our ball moves back and forth between the two positions. I'm going to pause that there and let you try that. Okay, this is really straightforward. Once you're done with that, there's a more advanced version of this that we're going to do. But for now, complete that. You should have figured out the difference between the things you should know for now are frames, keyframes, right click and adding a classic tween, and also note what's in your library. Do this until you understand everything that's done in this video, and then you can move on to the next one.